Hey everyone, welcome to Impact for this week. I'm Al, and I've got a question for you. It's kind of a big question, so I'm going to ask you to be really honest with yourself. What is the first thought that comes to your mind when I say the word vulnerable or vulnerability? Now, I'm not a betting person, but if I was, I would say that most of you felt a little uncomfortable when I asked you to think about vulnerability. And it's a safe bet, because I'm also willing to put money on the assumption that the first thought that came to your mind when I said the word vulnerability was weakness. Am I right? We're so conditioned to equate the two, to say that being vulnerable, being open about who we are and where we're at, is the same as being weak. But I'm here to say that that is not true. Vulnerability is strength. Last year, I was giving a talk to a young adults group, and I shared a part of my story with them. A part of my story that was deeply painful for me, that still stirs up feelings of hurt and worthlessness and shame. And after my story, I asked if they thought that I was weak for sharing it with them. And they all just shook their heads. Then I asked how they would describe it, what I'd done. And a few of them said things like, it was powerful, it showed strength, it was courageous. Now, I didn't feel strong, I felt vulnerable, but that's not what they saw. So often we see vulnerability as courage in someone else, but weakness in me. It's crazy, right? And we have to stop that way of thinking. Just get rid of the idea completely. And I'll tell you why. Because being vulnerable is how Jesus lived. Think about it. The incarnation, when God came into our world in the person of Jesus, he could have come as a mighty military leader or as a king or as some mystical power, but he didn't. God became just like us. God entered human history as a tiny baby, the most vulnerable that you can get. And then we look to the cross. For us as Christians, arguably the greatest and most powerful thing that has ever happened is the saving power of the crucifixion, where our God willingly gave up his life for the sake of the whole world. And how did this amazing act of strength happen? Jesus, hanging naked on a cross, dying. That's just so vulnerable. I think that the way Jesus lived and died is a testament to God turning everything we thought we knew about the world on its head. The salvation of the whole world came through an act of total vulnerability. So do you still think that vulnerability is weakness? I know that this is huge and upside down to so much of what we know, but you'll be happy to know that you're not alone. So many people have struggled with this crazy upside down idea. In the second letter to the Corinthians, St. Paul tells us something about his prayer life. He'd been struggling with a particular affliction, and he tells us what God revealed to him. But God said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for strength is made perfect in weakness." Then St. Paul goes on to say, "So I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore I am content with weaknesses, for whenever I am weak, then I am strong." Living your life vulnerably isn't all hugs and puppies and smooth sailing. Vulnerability is absolutely at the core of some really difficult emotions that we all experience, like fear, anxiety, shame. But vulnerability is also the birthplace of joy and love and creativity, belonging and faith. You have to be vulnerable to have faith, to be able to step into something that there is no proof for, to be willing to risk that people won't get it when you tell them what you believe. That's vulnerability. Brené Brown, who is this amazing social worker, psychology researcher, and I've used a bunch of her ideas in this message because she's life-changing, amazing. Brené defines vulnerability as our most accurate measure of courage. because the word courage originally meant something quite different to what we think it means these days. Courage comes from the Latin root word cor, which means heart. The original usage of the word was to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. So while it may not be easy to live vulnerably, it is so important if you want to live courageously. At Impact this week, I want to challenge you all not to just talk about these concepts intellectually, but to actually share something of yourselves, who you are and where you're at, how you struggle with this upside down idea of strength and vulnerability, to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. So do it, be vulnerable, and remember the words of St. Paul, for whenever I am weak, then I am strong.